So, Josh, talking about the pandemic, I've been enjoying your pictures. I've been following your Instagram for a while now, and I've seen that you have some personal projects. I noticed there are these things called there are a couple, right? They're like everyday heroes, and then uh, life in the quarantine or something like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
there are a few more. Could you explain about that for us, please?
sure. So I should kind of preface this by saying that I'm, how to best put it? I jokingly say I'm homeless, but I'm sort of a vagabond and I'm always on the road for work. And I had just been in Mozambique. I was coming through LA because my dad lives here. And, I was going to be here about a week. And then I was headed to Latin America for 3 months for an assignment. And the pandemic struck, and suddenly all the assignments were off. I wasn't going to be flying anywhere. So I'm like, okay, I'm back in my hometown, in the home I grew up in. And I reach out to certain clients I have, nothing, total crickets. I reach out to old newspapers, magazines. I even, chatted with some guys over at the AP here, and everyone's like, no freelancers, everything's dead.
True.
As a photographer, right? When I was young, I liked this idea of like, oh, if I make pictures and it changes one person. Well, as I got older, I realized my photos probably aren't changing anyone, but they have changed me. And really the way I look at photography today is I get to record history, right? I get to be in situations and see things. And if I'm in the middle of a pandemic, this is history unfolding before me. So how do I cover this situation in my own backyard? Nobody's given me an assignment, but I feel I need to do something. Now I've covered SARS, I've covered bird flu, I've covered Ebola, I've had malaria, I've done a lot of work in TB. So I kind of know about infectious diseases through the work I've done. So I also have, it's probably not fair to say, but I do have a little bit of understanding and confidence in how to approach things safely. You can get sick at any time, and I have been sick plenty, but I kind of looked at it and said, okay, well, what can I do? In LA, or California, we were the first state in the US to basically put stay-at-home orders. And that became really hard. So how do I illustrate stay at home? Well, I went out and I photographed lots of empty streets, and, I was lighting things, and I was trying to, look for stuff. I also then started thinking about who are the people we are relying on? Who are postman who brings us the post, the baker, the people working at the supermarket, right? These are essential workers. Financiers, they're not essential. Anyone in the banking, they're not essential. All of the people who became essential are the most menial laborers. It can be the UPS driver or the Gojek driver in Indonesia, right? Who's bringing you food. And really, these are the most lowly paid people most of the time. And yet they're with farm workers, right? The US is huge on like, oh, keep those immigrants out. Those immigrants are the ones who pick our fruits and vegetables. They're living in terrible conditions. They've come up through Latin America, and they're just here to try to survive so they can send money back to their family. And now they are actually our heroes because they're feeding us. And so I figured if I could go out and safely, social distancing, do portraits of people who are those everyday heroes and get some of their stories, it's valuable. And the amazing thing is when I talked to people, they actually felt really, really special that I'm like, I'm doing a personal project on everyday heroes and you're a hero. And they would get really moved and they were like, oh, thank you so much. That means a lot, because these are the people who are so often overlooked. One of the problems I've found, though, is I come across the food bank and I'm like, hey, can I shoot pictures? And they're like, oh, no, you have to get permission from headquarters. And the same thing goes, like nurses or hospitals. I can't just walk into a hospital or just happen to know somebody. The steps you have to take to get access in the US are impossible. Compare that to Indonesia, where usually you have a friend of a friend and someone's like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. And those personal relationships in a place like Indonesia allow you so much more access. In the US, it is so hard to work. So that's been part of the project. And then I've also been running into people while I do that project, just, life in the pandemic, how they're surviving. Everyone from my father to homeless people I've photographed. And now what's happened, the interesting dynamic in the US is initially we had the stay-at-home orders and people were kind of unified. People were scared. They didn't know what was going on because Americans have never suffered, right? As a nation, anyone living today, they didn't live through the Depression. So they don't know that kind of impact. In developing countries, like you guys had Krismon, right? You guys do remember a time where things got really, really hard. And people know the whole world doesn't fall apart, but you figure out how to make things work. Americans don't have that. They've had everything laid out for them. And they think, oh, as long as I obey, everything will be fine. And,
No, but
and now, mhm.
it's like Indonesian millennials. They don't live through the Krismon. Everyone that
Yeah.
was born after '98, they're pretty
Yeah.
much like that. Have
Yeah.
everything.
Everything.
They
And
feel
so now,
entitled.
yeah, exactly. And now that suddenly the world is turned upside down, they don't know how to handle it,
That's
right?
true.
And the fact of the matter is we've covered emergencies. We've seen people time and again go, oh yeah, this bad thing happened, but we do as human beings, we have no option but to move forward. And the strange thing in America today is some people who are from the right, and a thing for you to consider too, because you've covered small vocal minorities who, as media, we amplify their voice. And when we amplify their voice, we give them more importance. And yesterday, I was out at a demonstration, and I was personally kind of torn because last Monday, I was down in Orange County and I photographed one of these demonstrations, and people were very friendly to me. But, I thought, oh, interesting. And then when I went to LA, I saw many of those same people, at which point I realized this is a very, very small group of very vocal people who are being supported financially by a small group of very rich people related to Trump, right? And so you begin to see these connections and you're like, should we really be giving them the voice? If it's only 200 people yelling, they don't speak for the fifth largest economy in the world, but suddenly their voices are being amplified by the media. So I'm kind of torn as well when I now cover that. But why am I doing this? I have no idea. Why am I putting myself at risk by going into these groups of people? I don't know, because that's what I do. I wish I had a better reason, but I feel I need to be there to record history. I don't know why I'm recording this history, but Dorothea Lange, I don't know, you remember
Correct. Yes.
the migrant mom during the Depression?
Yeah.
So much of her early work, she was living in New York and she was just documenting what was happening, right? Eventually she was brought on by the FSA, and which was I won't bore you guys with all the technical stuff, but so much of her early work was documenting that reality. And why was she doing that? Because she had that drive to. And I wish I really had a better excuse, but I just feel I have to do something.
Yeah. So sometimes as a photographer, what our first instinct is just to not you know, to run or escape if there's any danger or anything. But the first instinct is to shoot. It
Yeah.
happens to me too. So maybe we should show our audience the your series.
Yeah. And I can talk about actually each image a little bit. This was
Right.
the very first week of the lockdown, the first weekend. So I went out to Rodeo Drive over in Beverly Hills, and it was all empty. And I'm riding back on my bike, and I see this girl like dancing in the streets, and I was like, "What on earth?" And so I stopped and I, made some pictures. And yeah, she was just like, I loved her homemade shirt, the mix matched latex gloves. I mean, it was just kind of one of those surreal moments. And cars would go by and honk. And she was just like, yeah, we need to get this message out. We need to stay at home. We need to, and there was there was sort of a purity to it. And, I've sat on this photo for about a month, and I just posted it yesterday. And it's so interesting because yesterday I'm at a demonstration where people are saying, let us go back out, and to see how the country's almost been ripped apart over the course of a month.
Wait,
And
Josh, just let me put it on a to understand more about the context. So LA is under a lockdown,
yeah,
right?
well,
Kind of.
it's at a stay-at-home order. So yeah, lots of
How
businesses are closed.
how strict it is? Is it? Can you still go out doing
Yeah.
things?
So LA is a big suburb. So, you can go for walks, you can go for runs. The parks are closed, the beaches are closed, the mountain trails are closed. But, you can go to the supermarket. Now you're supposed to wear a mask if you go to the supermarket. Um, People have been very good about obeying the stay-at-home orders.
Right.
Real quick on this, I was driving with my dad to the supermarket. My dad's 83, so I tell him, don't go into the
Hmm.
supermarket, I'll go in for you. But we're driving, and I turn a corner and I see these people backlit from like down the road, and I like turn the car around, and it's a hospital parking lot. I literally jumped out with my pocket camera, and I knew I had to stay at a certain distance, and they were doing the swab tests. And this was like within the first week. It was really, really hard to find this. And there's like two other photographers in this parking lot, and everyone's wearing masks. I literally jumped down. I don't have anything. And I
You're the only one with small camera.
yeah, and I got this pocket camera, and I'm just like, I'm going to shoot this because I need to get this. I don't ask permission, and in the US, like, I'm on private property at this point. But I saw them backlit in that light coming through, and I knew if I underexposed them, I could make something kind of dramatic because I'm shooting with like the equivalent of a 28 millimeter lens. Actually, it's cropped as a square. That's how I shoot on my pocket camera. So it's like maybe a 32 millimeter lens. So it's a wide angle, so I can't get close to them. I need to keep my distance. I should have been there with like the 135 and the DSLR. But, like, how do you make something? Sometimes, whatever camera you have at hand, you just make a photo. And I knew that it was some form of documentation because getting access to any of this in the US is impossible. So, and especially in California, we don't have high numbers of deaths like they do in New York City because we've had a really good policy with our stay at home. So we've been able to flatten the curve. Photo, I think you see them getting swabs. Um, yeah. So, they were doing the swabs, and that's as close as I felt comfortable getting because the people in the cars are definitely people who probably have
Yeah.
COVID-19. Um, anyways, you know, okay, so another funny story. I ride my bicycle to the Costco near my place because I had been there the day before to get some stuff, and I got there early, but by the time we went in, I saw how long the line was. So I'm like, I'm gonna go take the drone and get some pictures. I get there, and like my battery's dead in the drone. So I'm like, ah. So I literally just had my pocket camera with me, and I just shot a frame for myself, right? And I'm like, that's just crazy, but I'm going to ride back home, get the drone. And I rode back, and by that time they had allowed people in. So it ended up becoming like the only frame I had, but you kind of get a sense of just how insane it was in those early days. Like, Americans were freaked out, and they were buying in bulk, and it was really kind of surreal. And again, people were very scared. I mean, this was in the first week, and people were just terrified. And there was like this real sense of the unknown. And it's like that idea of the toilet paper, right? Everyone rushing to buy toilet paper. We should
Yes.
have bidets. Why don't Americans use bidets? I will say, living in Asia, I learned the beauty of a bidet. When I came back to my dad's place, I ordered one and installed it. So, not worried about the toilet paper here.
I did send you pictures of toilet papers from one supermarket, right? It's like a
Yeah,
bunch.
I mean, Indonesia has plenty of it. No problem. We could probably go to the next photo. So downtown LA is usually packed. And again, I'm on my bike, and, it was just desolate. And again, all I had was my pocket camera. If I'd had the 135, I could have got a long lens. I could have had the compression. But, sometimes anyone who's from LA will see this and just be like, this makes no sense. Middle of the day, there's no cars. I waited for the one bus to pass, so there was at least some sort of element in size. But yeah, you can change to the next photo.
You always shoot square.
For my Instagram, I always shoot square. I use a little Ricoh GR, and I keep it in square format. The local parks, they were taped off with, caution tape so the kids didn't go and play. But again, how do you make that look interesting? It's like a park with caution tape, And so I'm lighting stuff with gels, and, I'm playing, because what else do you do when things are so boring? So I just thought it was kind of funny that it was. This is the park down the street from my house. And so I would just go for walks at night because everything was empty. Even now, I'm outside and it's so quiet. There's no cars going by. There was one jet that just went over, but it's almost always silent. And that's so strange in LA to just have this overwhelming silence.
Eerie quietness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
change to the next.
It's totally in the opposite here. We still have traffic jams.
Of course, it's Jakarta. It'll never change.
Well, by Indonesian standard, it's quiet, but if you by LA standard, it's still crowded.
Toilet paper aisles. I can still go into toilet paper aisles today. Almost 2 months into our lockdown, and yeah, they're still empty, just like this. Anyway, we can go to the next photo. This was just yesterday at LA City Hall. These are those protesters I was mentioning. There were maybe a couple hundred of them, really vocal. But if you go to the next photo. Can we go to the, yeah. It was like, these people were surreal. Look at how much makeup that girl had on. This was one of these bizarre things where I get there and, there's a bunch of different protesters, and you can't see here, but she's like in these super hot pants, like shorts, and a ton of makeup. And you're just like, where am I? What are people like? It makes no sense. And each one of these people have some sort of thing they're into. Like hers was about domestic violence and suicide. This guy behind her is like about the Jews. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like this dude's like a doomsdayer behind her. I mean, just all of these really weird things going on where people are focused in these rabbit holes of the internet that they've studied so much about. And yet at the same time, they're all there because it's kind of a weird Trump rally. I don't know how to explain it, but very friendly. Everyone was super nice.
So no one accusing you of being fake news?
No, people are like, oh, are you a journalist? I'm like, hey, I'm just shooting for my Instagram. But I did purposely, because LAPD was there, I did carry my old press pass.
Right.
So, I mean, they saw, I just, had it in my pocket. I did that so I wouldn't be hassled by the LAPD. But actually, everyone here was totally fine. And they're all holding up signs like, fake news, don't believe fake news. And they're like, hey, which media are you with? Because they want to be on the news, right? And you're like, this doesn't make sense. So this particular rally, another photographer forwarded me their marching orders. And actually, they have really, really strict marching orders. And they were asked not to bring the Trump flags, to wear red, white, and blue, to have diversity in the signs. They were told where to buy different signboard. Like, they had all of these directions. So technically, these groups, though they seem very independent, are being organized by very rich conservative groups related to the administration. So it's a strange political thing. But again, very small numbers, and we're amplifying their voice. And what responsibility do we have as journalists? And are we just documenting this, or are we participants in what's happening through our actions? The number of kids out kind of disturbed me a little bit too. But they're very big in their cars and honking horns. Whew, yeah. It's like the old motorbikes. Wah, 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 wah. These guys were,
Right.
With their horns, just driving in circles as well. Oh, I just have to point out that the light keeps changing because it's early morning here. I have to do something with my background because I have to show off the background. Can I do that?
All right, sure.
Okay, hold on.
Sure. Sekedar info aja, Josh di halaman belakang rumahnya. And look at that. It's early morning in LA.
Okay.
What time is it in LA, Josh? What time is it now? There?
It's like it's almost 7 a.m.
Wow.
But yeah, look at the light is all beautiful coming in. Anyways, so this was down in Orange County. This other photo was down in Orange County. Again, when I started talking to these people, really friendly with me, really nice. But some of the stuff they're talking about is very strange. How liberty is being taken away through the pandemic and our constitutional rights. And you're like, where does the idea of we and me come into play? Like, Americans are big about we the people. In a pandemic, we should be we the people and kind of united and understanding we need to help other people. And I think, like in Asia, that idea of I make a small sacrifice myself to help the greater good is really understood, and that has to do with family and society. But in America, Americans are like, the government needs to help me, but not we. And it's a strange dynamics. Yes, we can.
Next.
Yeah. Yeah, so these just give you an idea of what the demonstration was like. We can move on to the next photos. I just realized the time, if you guys want to take questions. Oh, my dad in the garden, we were out working. I saw him and I'm like, wait a second, Dad. I ran inside. Okay, I got some lights, I confess. But I got my pocket camera and I shot a picture of him. And he had such an interesting quote because he remembers World War II. And yeah, this is part of the just everyday quarantine series. And, he doesn't get to go out. He doesn't get to go to the market or do all the things he's done. We can go to the next photo.
This one is from the
This is,
series Life Under Quarantine, is it?
yeah, Life Under Quarantine. Yeah, and this is a photographer I went to school with back in university, and I was in downtown LA and I messaged him, and he hadn't gone out at all, and he's lost all of his work. And he does, he now started doing this whole series at night, which is beautiful, these super long exposures in downtown LA. And, but, we were talking on the street, and finally I'm like, I got to get a photograph of you. And, I threw up some lights and shot some pictures of him. But again, his quote, it was really interesting about, slowing down. And this was sort of a forced slowdown, and how he needs to learn to appreciate that. And when I posted the photo, he, messaged me and was like, I forgot how scared I was at that time. And he actually really appreciated the photo because it did freeze a moment in time for him and how he was feeling. We can go to the next photo. These were some homeless guys I met in the first week. And these guys were like, oh, no, it's fine. I don't know anyone who has it. Do you know anyone who has it? It kills us. It kills us. They'll bury us in the riverbed. And it was like this idea of like, yeah, who cares? And, there's a certain feeling to that too. Yeah. And they're Trump supporters, which is also odd. But, what can I say? We can go to the next photo.
It's pretty similar because I think they're everywhere. There's people who don't care or think it's just a big conspiracy theory.
A big hoax. And yet they're the most vulnerable, right? And this is from the Everyday Heroes. This is a coffee shop kid who was working. And, actually...
Real heroes, these guys.
Yeah, I mean, we need our coffee. But 2 days later, he stopped working because his roommate, who also works here, thought he had COVID-19. And so they stopped working at the shop altogether because they were afraid they might spread something. Tests have been limited, so that kid was sick, but he still doesn't know if he had COVID or not because he never got tested. Anyways, we can move on to the next photo. This is a survivor. So I'm also doing another series, and there's a group of photographers around the US who are trying to tell survivors' stories. So I met her down in downtown LA in front of her house outside. And her and her boyfriend had been quarantined for like 3 weeks. And, she told me all about what she had gone through, how it affected her mentally, physically. And, sometimes you're kind of stuck with like, you're looking on the street and you're like, what am I going to shoot? So, there's a lovely bougainvillea bush behind her. But again, this story is kind of what is going to hold that part of the project together. And these haven't been shown yet. This one and the next one I'll show you. But there's actually sort of a stigma with a lot of the survivors who don't want to be talked about. I know and I think it's strange that there's a stigma. This man was one of the first Americans to come down with COVID-19. He was on the cruise ship in Japan. They flew him back. They flew him all the way to Nebraska. Interesting story. Him and his wife, and then another friend of theirs, a couple friend, they went on this cruise together. They were in 2 rooms, adjoining rooms. 3 of the 4 came down with COVID-19. His wife, totally clean, not a problem. And he was really cool and interesting, and I went out and visited him. And then this is a drone shot of a parking lot. And normally that parking lot is very full with cars. I just figured you guys would appreciate this because Jakarta and mall parking lots are like, could you imagine a mall in Jakarta looking like this? Like it would never happen. So anyways, that's sort of some of the work I've been doing on the pandemic.
Awesome work, Josh. So I think it's time for Q&A, but question about this, So back to our, you mentioned in the beginning that, you go out and risk yourself, which is quite true because every time we go out, we actually expose ourselves.
Yeah.
And do you think it's worth it?
You know what? I've kind of had to weigh this because I come home and my dad is 83, right? And he's
Right.
had heart surgery. So
Oh, and especially
having,
because there's no pay, right?
yeah, because there is no pay, right? And we don't have great medical health care in America unless you're super rich. And so is it worth it? No, I should probably stay home. I mean, in truth, and I would tell other people, stay home. Because talking to people who've survived it, it's not fun. And I have met other people who have relatives who didn't survive. But I'm taking calculated risks based on experience.
Right.
And, I think that's what we do a lot of times. I know you yourself, you've covered a lot of conflicts, and there's risks you take to get photos, but it's calculated
Right.
risks.
Right.
You're not just going in blindly. And so I take a lot of the knowledge I've gained over the years. And in fact, the one thing I've noticed is in the early days, I was able to help calm lots of people I met because they've never experienced anything like this, right? And I've helped some of the store owners who I photographed and stuff. I'm like, listen, you need to get hand sanitizer. You need to let people in staggered, numbers. These things nobody had a context to. And I realized that because of the experiences I've had other places, I did know a little bit about this. And, I'm a photographer. I'm not an epidemiologist or a doctor or, but through 20 years of covering these sorts of things, you do pick up a little bit. So in that sense, I kind of feel I'm probably as good suited for doing this kind of work as anyone because I know what I'm looking for and I kind of know what to watch out for.
Right. And you're
But no, it doesn't pay.
yeah, but you're documenting history.
Yeah. And
Never before that we photographers all over the world working on the same thing at the same time.
Exactly. And we're each going to bring different visions. And some people, if you're in Italy in the epicenter, you might have a different experience and be able to get amazing photographs. I'm in a place where it's pretty calm. So what do I do but shoot everyday life,
Yeah, that's true.